todos. That's California for welcome to the August 3rd edition of National Review's Radio Free California podcast. I'm Will Swaim. I'm president of the California Policy Center. You can find my colleagues and me at californiapolicycenter.org. You can find my friend and co-host David Bonson right here. He's an author, political commentator, and the founder of the eponymous investment firm, the Bonson Group. Hello, David.
Hello, Will, and I just want to let our listeners know that you and I are both fully masked right now as we're talking.
I'm wearing a Yoda mask.
Yes. I'm wearing a mask over my knees. They're called pants. Stop the spread. Just one life.
There will be no drinking on this show for me. Hey, you have just yesterday you sent out a notice. Your book is done. It's ready to go.
It's done. I finally got the finished, laid out manuscript back from my publisher. I was able to send it out to a few people and get some really wonderfully encouraging endorsements from Ben Shapiro and Larry Kudlow and John Podhoretz and Steve Forbes, a bunch of guys that I look up to a lot that have endorsed the book. So it doesn't come out till November 2nd. That's when Amazon will have it at the doorstep. But I think we'll have the audio and the Kindle a little sooner. But hey, it's on, and this book means a lot to me because of the message.
Well, tell us, because the title comes from an old saying, there's no free lunch, and I think you said 250?
Yeah, it's called There's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths. The website for the book is nofreeluncheconomics.com, nofreeluncheconomics.com. And that may seem a little long, but it is at least easier to remember. And, you know, we tried. Our same team that produces this podcast, Brian and Glenn, helped me with all the kind of web URL setup and all that. It's tricky to find web URLs. Did you know that all the good ones are taken?
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I think nofreeluncheconomics.com is pretty good, but the site's live and it has some of the stuff in the book and all that. But, yeah, you know what it is, Will? I talk to you, you talk to me, we talk to our listeners all the time about first things. I don't believe that conservatism is an instinct. I don't believe free market economics are an impulse. I think both things ought to come out of a philosophy that is rooted in principles. And to the extent there is such thing as an instinct of conservatism, that's fine, but I don't want people to be reliant on it. I want them to quit drinking milk and start eating meat, and to do that you have to kind of formulate what your first principles are, out of which you formulate the way you view the world. And in economics, I'm trying to get people to understand those first things so that from there, when it comes to controversial subjects about policy, when it comes to how we think about things related to wealth, to class envy, to some of the topics that influence that matter in policy, minimum wage laws, free trade, that there are core principles there that we can look back to. And yet we don't need a whole lot of new information here. These things are out there. There's giants, literal giants, some cases pre-Enlightenment. I think Aristotle and Aquinas and other scholastics provided a lot of foundations, but obviously not very developed and systematic around economics. But then with the founding of the classical school with Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Jean Say, you get a kind of early 18th and 19th century foundation in classical econ, and then from there, the greats, the legends, the giants that formulated so much of how I think, your Friedrich Hayek's, your Ludwig von Mises, your Milton Friedman's. So I have some guys are still living. Art Laffer's quoted a lot in the book.
Thomas Sowell?
Thomas Sowell's quoted heavily in the book. Walter Williams, who just passed away very recently, though. So it's a mixed group, but all of it comes down to what I think is the anthropological foundation of economics, which is the dignity of mankind that is a byproduct of God's created order.
Tell me, because I think this is one of the more interesting aspects of at least the intellectual shift I got to make from, Marxist left to free market kind of conservatarian sort of person is there's a sense in which the challenge on the left is always how do we perfect humanity? How do we create a utopia? And in that sense, there's no real fixed human nature. You can just reshape humans and make the modern communist man. How is that different? Does a different, you talked about human dignity. How does that shine through in the essays you've written here in this new book?
Well, I think that one of the principles that I allude to in the book is the unchanging nature of man that stems from man being the created, and God being the creator, and that there's a sort of theological principle there that is profoundly important to economics. But ultimately, the biggest issue I think that people kind of struggle with is, what is economics? And what I try to do in the book is at least start with the definition of human actions, of economics as the study of human action. And that the way in which man acts in time in response to scarcity of resources, and in response to household management and the allocation decisions they make at a very local level. Really, Friedrich Hayek's brilliance in the knowledge problem, where he talked about effectively it was sort of a Catholic subsidiarity doctrine applied to economics, that there isn't enough knowledge in a central power based on how knowledge is dispersed in a complex population, that you need local decision making for optimal allocation of decisions, resources, etc. But basically, I think the knowledge problem stems out of a definition of economics as human action. And so the book goes to great length to explain that when we keep our eye on the ball of what economics is, what the optimal circumstances for social cooperation are, that you are left with no choice but to reject command control view of economics, which is in its worst form Marxism, in a slightly less worse form socialism, but in a very definitional form collectivism. And I think all of them are part and parcel of the same fallacy.
And they just seem to run through. Brian asked me before the show, like, you got a lot to talk about today. It's like every single day there are examples of California government, whether at the state or local level, in which local officials are trying to overcome the knowledge problem by saying, no, we know. And this isn't just government officials. The first story that I wanted to come to today is a kind of a funny, well, to me it's a very funny story, actually. It's there's a coming bacon shortage in California. Don't know if you've heard about this yet.
It's not funny. What?
Yeah, this is.
Please tell me you said there's a turkey bacon shortage. Dear God, I'm going back to New York.
Impossible bacon. Well, you should go back to New York if you, as you love bacon. But this is one of those examples. So in 2018...
I wouldn't even be friends with someone who doesn't love bacon.
Well, bacon is one of my favorite foods, too. It's one of the major food groups: bacon, fruits, vegetables. So in 2018, this is California voters. I've been talking to economists about this, both for the pork lobby and elsewhere, seriously, because I'm actually writing a piece for National Review. Here's what's fascinating. Back up. In 2018, California voters voted for Prop 12, which was basically it was pitched as anti-animal cruelty. And nobody likes cruelty to animals unless you're a sociopath and you also like, arson and murder. So, the way in which our food is produced must be consistent, of course, with human values. We're stewards of our animal of our animal co-creators here on the planet. So, long story short, like 68% of California voters in 2018 vote not just for Gavin Newsom but for Prop 12, and this is limiting the ways in which, or prescribing the ways in which you can produce pork, veal, and chickens, and chicken and eggs in particular.
Meaning, and by produce, you mean at the wholesale level, like
yes.
Before it gets to your grocery store.
Yes, out on the Iowa farm, the ways in which they produce pork for distribution.
And I don't want to be. I'm not trying to be funny or gross, but what you mean is how the animals are killed,
raised from birth to slaughter.
Death.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is an example in which I think this is a great example of which we have many, that in which California's assumption to be a leader in the world, a shining city on a hill, is about collectivism. It's about the overcoming the knowledge problem. So California voters just said, yeah, that sounds great to me. We can vote for these new restrictions on the way in which our food is produced, and it's not going to cost anybody anything. And the result is that by January 1st, we are supposed to, in California, only be able to purchase any kind of pork products. Let's just focus on the bacon problem. The bacon problem. And that is that we're going to double the size allotted to each pig and the ways in which they are allowed to reproduce, and it's not going to have an impact at all on our prices. Well, guess what? It will. There's an expectation that prices may rise as much as 50% for bacon, that very few pig farmers are in a situation where they can actually upscale, if you will, the way in which they raise their pigs for slaughter. And part of the problem is that California regulators haven't yet come out with the plan. They've had 3 years already to come up with the implications of this regulation. Iowa farmers and others around the country are kind of waiting. And as I talk to these people, they are anxious. There are very, very few hog farmers who are prepared to turn on a dime to produce for the California market. And this will have a national impact. This is going to have an impact on pork prices everywhere and on the ability of hog farmers to stay in their business.
But see, I think that the economic takeaway here is the name of my book. Although maybe it would be there's no free breakfast. But by the way, I think you can eat bacon all 3 meals, because I think you can go with bacon with your eggs at breakfast, but you can have a club sandwich at lunch.
I like it.
And then at dinner, well, you could go bacon-wrapped scallops in your appetizer.
I also bacon-wrapped wieners. And what's the salad? Is it the Cobb? You said the Cobb salad?
Oh, Cobb salad? Yeah.
Salad.
You mean it's like an appetizer?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, for me, it would be the whole meal, but
dear,
okay.
Good Lord. But my point is that's fine. So, what the economist, not the policymaker or the animal rights activist or anything else, just simply the economic lesson here is whatever you want to do here on the pig thing, let's do it.
Right.
But there's no free lunch.
That's right.
It's going to have a cost. And in this case, the cost is going to be, so you're going to get a little bit different treatment and different process and so forth. And you either like that or you don't.
Right.
You either think it's necessary or you don't. But what's the cost benefits analysis? And in this case, if we're going to have a 50% increase, is this a price that low-income households are willing to pay? Let's have all that information. And by the way, people could get it wrong in what they do with that information. People could certainly disagree as to what to do with the information, and they would disagree. But all I would say is that the great lie of our time is trying to say you can have free lunch.
That's right.
That you can actually have this social agenda or environmental agenda or animal rights agenda or whatever, and that there's not an offsetting cost.
That's right.
There's no free lunch.
Yeah, or that the cost is just something that conservatives whine about, which was the case here. So
Can we hurry up? I'm getting hungry.
The Humane Society was the backer of Prop 12, and it was fun if you remember back to 2018, the Humane Society got into a war with groups like PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the more radical group, and PETA was accusing...
I thought you said pizza.
PETA, like bread.
Yeah.
And so PETA hated the Humane Society and said Prop 12 is a sellout. It just means more animal misery. The fact is that what this is going to do is have a direct impact, as I said, on the national food supply, and particularly, as economists pointed out to me, an impact on the poor. It turns out that poorer people, and especially poorer people of color, as our friends on the left like to say, Latino people and black people in California and Asian people tend to eat more pork than their white counterparts. And so this is likely to have a pernicious impact on the on poor groups that the left is always saying they care about. It will raise the cost of living, in short, because it will raise the cost of food. Similarly, I did not put this in the run list, and I'm so sorry. Or maybe I did. Yes, I did, actually. The California salmon wipeout is even worse than you think. This is from the LA Times editorial board. I'm just going to blast through this. It's a BS piece, if you'll pardon the use of the Française. And... this is an argument that somehow, because of Donald Trump, salmon are dying, and that Trump-era policies to push water through to Central Valley farmers is leading to the absolute extinction of salmon. Then you just begin to read the story, and it turns out that, Joe Biden and Gavin Newsom have signed off on these waivers that allow water to go through to the Central Valley. And there's no discussion of the fact that in 40 years, California hasn't built a new dam, that the LA Times board also proposes, has blocked every attempt by water boards locally to produce desalination plants. The LA Times has always been against that. So we can't have water abundance that would actually save the salmon because these would destroy the environment in some other place. So for the LA Times, it's none of the above.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't notice that you had already done that no free breakfast joke.
I did on the run list.
On the run list.
Yeah.
So this and I already admitted to you I hadn't had a chance to review the run list today. and I stand by the fact that I've been really doing a lot better lately at reading the run list, but I didn't see it today, as I told you, and I just noticed that I told a joke live on air that you had already told in the run list.
It's the zeitgeist, brother.
Great minds think alike.
So, salmon wipeout, the newspaper that opposes all new water production facilities everywhere. Like, literally, show me a place where the LA Times has said, let's build a dam or let's build a desal plant or more reservoirs. They haven't. They won't. And instead, they now complain that salmon are dying. If you want to save salmon by pushing more water into waterways, make sure that you're, producing desalination in great reservoirs. But they won't do that. Yep. So, no salmon, no bacon for us. And then this is one of the fun stories of the week. Did you see this one about Abraham Lincoln? This came out of the Orange County Register, but it's been all over the place. There's a new documentary coming out on Disney Plus, which I will absolutely watch. And one of the episodes is about the fabulous attraction on Main Street at Disneyland. Did you ever go see Mr. Lincoln?
I did.
Yes, as a little kid, I didn't like it. As a teenager, I began to love it. And as an adult, I think it's one of the best. There's a robot, Mr. Lincoln, on Main Street in Disneyland here in Anaheim. And Mr. Lincoln gets up and delivers these just really stirring words and invocations of the Constitution. But apparently, in the early days of the attraction, back in the early 60s to mid-60s, Mr. Lincoln would occasionally start to act up and literally destroy the furniture on the stage, like a robot gone insane. Pardon me. So we have, let me see if I can find this great story. Here it comes. Walt was really upset. Disney signs an agreement. Here we go. Imagineers could not get the Lincoln animatronic, that's what they call a robot, to move through its programming successfully. Honest Abe kept throwing robot fits, flailing his arms and smashing his chair to bits. The Imagineers were at a loss. They finally found out that there was a nearby light show that was going on that would disrupt Mr. Lincoln's robot programming and cause him to go in this just like homicidal rage, where he would just, well, I guess it wouldn't be homicidal, furniture-cidal, and he would destroy his chair. But, the thing that I like best here in the Register story was it points out that...
I'm so curious where we're going with this. How this made the run list.
Well, because who doesn't like robot stories where robots go nuts and destroy things?
Like, I think that's what it is.
That's all it really is. But I'm going to pretend that it's about California because it occurred at Disneyland, and I'm going to pretend that it's about the Constitution because here's what Walt said when he demanded his Imagineers, as they call them, design this Lincoln robot. Quote, "We have always tried to be guided by the basic idea that in the discovery of knowledge there is also great entertainment, but in all good entertainment there is also some grain of wisdom, humanity, or enlightenment to be gained." Boom! So that's why we're talking about Lincoln robots.
Wow.
Okay?
That's a fantastic setup.
Hey, let's talk about the recall.
It's getting hot.
It is getting hot. Now, I have to acknowledge that I did not expect that it would get this close with this one caveat.
Don't do a mea culpa yet because we don't know nothing.
No, we don't know nothing. It's still
by the way, it's my favorite thing about people with polls. The polls say something you don't like. The polls are always wrong. The polls are always wrong. And then all of a sudden the polls say something people like. They go, look at
the polls. Really cool. Yeah. I have at least been saying that barring a bad summer, which we're starting to see.
Yeah, no, it's
right?
true.
And we'll talk about that. Barring a bad summer, Newsom might actually just kick butt. Why? Because Democrats are by far the larger number of typical voters. But likely voters now show a gap in enthusiasm among Democrats. And I'm hearing this everywhere. You cannot read a newspaper or magazine, a major news magazine in America today without hearing Gavin Newsom say, "Help. I'm desperate. Come to my need. If you don't," like Newsom is telling national Democratic donors, if you don't bail me out of the trouble I'm in, this is just a foreshadowing of 2022 and the Republicans are going to recapture the House. So now he's trying to make this larger claim. This morning,
the thing that's so interesting, and I think it's the first story. It's the first story you have in the list of articles on this. The reality is, I don't know why he's saying he needs all this help. He's in trouble for money. He may be in trouble for enthusiasm. He may be in trouble because of the LA County Public Health and the teachers unions, creating a more challenging political environment for him to have to overcome. But the dollars are overwhelming how much more money he has to spend than the pro-recall people.
You found the story. They have a 200-to-1 spending advantage, the Newsom anti-recall campaign.
So you find me a political consultant. or a 5-year-old and go to them and say, this thing's real close in the polls, and one side has $200 to spend for every $1 the other side has, and tell me who they think's going to win. Look, if you got if you're tight in the polls and you have a 20-point registration advantage, and you won by 20 points, and literally you have the 200 to 1 is from 5.9 million, 13.3 million to $86,000.
Yeah,
and you lose.
Yeah.
You should not be recalled. You should probably be executed.
Well, I talked to a data friend of mine who tells me that right now the likelihood of Newsom's recall is likelier than Trump's 2016 victory. Now, you could say that about almost every statistical phenomenon, I think.
I don't know what that means. I understand, but with Electoral College, I don't know what that means. Because what one had to do to handicap the Trump election is have a different point of view, not on 50 states, but on 12 states, and then have all those outcomes integrate with one another. It's a lot of complexity.
Yeah, you're right.
But I think that with this thing, you know what? You're about to get to it, so I'm going to let you. Why don't you do a long setup on the Larry Elder thing?
Sure.
Because I do wonder if that's a game changer, having a candidate there.
Well, first of all, before I move on to Elder, let me just say one last thing about money that our friend Will O'Neill, former mayor of Newport Beach, still in the city council there, and just a really formidable talent. And I ask our listeners to pay attention to people like Kevin Kiley, who's in the recall. He's awesome. He is young. He is going places. Smart guy. He speaks without sounding ideological. Same for Will O'Neill, who is to not sound ideological is not, please don't mistake me, is not to be without principle. But Will O'Neill writes in a recent piece that appeared all over Southern California, the headline is Elizabeth Warren's attack on the recall, good heavens, cuts against her public persona. So one of the things that Newsom has done is deployed major people, big, high-profile kinds of Democrats on his behalf. Among them, Elizabeth Warren. I know you'll have something to say about this. You wrote a book about it.
Yeah, but I actually have something to say about it politically. I mean, look, I don't have anything to say about not liking Elizabeth Warren or not believing in her policy platform. I don't think any of our listeners probably like Elizabeth Warren, and I do believe ideologically that she's an easy target, and that a lot of things she believes and stands for are very dangerous. And I thought my book was a pretty good book to take down those various policy differences. I'm curious about the politics here. I actually have plenty of critical things to say, obviously, every week about Gavin and California Democrats, but I don't generally think they're stupid. And I don't get this Elizabeth Warren thing. Now, the argument would be it's about base enthusiasm.
Can I just back up and tell people what's going on? There's a TV advertisement going on right now, which you can see. A big one. Huge spend. Yeah. And it features Elizabeth Warren. And as Will O'Neill points out, having Elizabeth Warren as your spokesperson on TV is problematic for myriad reasons. But David, proceed.
But I think that I would imagine they're thinking that is probably rooted in some data or focus group or study, is that there's a national recognition and base enthusiasm that Warren helps with. Maybe it's a female vote thing. I just can't imagine that. I don't know a lot of women that like her either, to be honest. But whatever. But I think back to that California pharma bill that was going to limit what they could spend on pharmaceuticals to Medicare pricing. And it was a backdoor way for price fixing with pharma. And it failed overwhelmingly, and I couldn't believe it. But I was very encouraged. But they brought out Bernie Sanders, big guns, in the final couple weeks of that to try to have him rally for that measure, and it didn't help. And so having this Boston, granted, there is some Indian American populations here in California, and that could be the play. It could be Morongo and Agua Caliente.
But
that Elizabeth Warren is. So as we're doing this real time, it's starting to make sense to me.
You say you didn't read this. You're thinking on the fly, but you've just hit it. This is the get out the Native American vote. Will points out that there's a bunch of problems with having Elizabeth Warren as your spokesperson. Your spokesperson. One of which is that she looks into the camera and tells us that this is a Republican recall. This is, of course, the Newsom campaign's whole point. This is a Republican recall. And my friends who are Democrats but who listen exclusively.
What is that? What does that mean? Okay, the thing that's a Trump recall and a MAGA recall,
right.
That's obviously disingenuous,
sure.
and it's meant to be politically loaded. But it's not that it's unfair. It isn't true, but it's like that's a fair political thing. I get what they're doing. But it's a Republican recall. So you mean there's a Democrat governor and there's a group of people that want to get rid of him?
Called Republicans.
And they're Republicans?
They're in another party.
So what the hell is going on here?
Yeah. So, and as Will says, you got to ignore the polls, which show real widespread, especially, among some Democrats whose kids got locked out of school, widespread dissatisfaction with the governor. And then it's that Will points out that Warren is backing a candidate in Gavin Newsom who is got like millions and millions of dollars, including millions of dollars from billionaires who Elizabeth Warren says she's got a beef with. Will points out that you've got Reed Hastings of Netflix, George Marcus, the real estate developer, Connie Ballmer, the NBA LA Clippers guy, hedge fund investors James Simons, Liz Simons, and Mark Heising. These people contributed $1 million each. They are billionaires. And Elizabeth Warren has zero problem with money.
Did you know that by
politics.
the time you started that sentence to the time you finished it, Jim Simons made another $7 million? He literally just...
It's what's really fun though is just again if what do they say about that if these never mind. So Warren is also silent on money flowing out of California's government unions. He points out the state prison guards gave Newsom's anti-recall effort.
But who do people like right now? Like who is necessary? Why are there not like celebrities? The Elizabeth Warren thing is weird. I don't think you want like Sarah Jessica Parker or someone like a smug Hollywood elite, may not. But there's got to be like a rapper or like a Taylor Swift or like some sort of pop culture persona that can help Newsom here.
Would the pro-abortion crowd, would that count as a celebrity? Because they came out today. Let me see if I can find this one. NARAL. That's the, if I remember correctly, the National Association. No, National Abortion Rights.
I don't think that rallies up voter turnout because I don't think any.
I'm really being. I'm kidding.
No, I know you are, but I'm saying I don't think the pro-abort crowd is sitting there going, "Oh, all of our future movement success hinges on the California recall."
Well, they're saying that.
Yeah,
I doubt they
but I don't
believe
think
it.
anyone. But I don't think anyone.
But it was classic. This recall effort, says NARAL director Shannon Olivieri. This recall effort is nothing more than a hate-filled, Republican-fueled campaign. Not just Republican-backed, but it is Republican-fueled. They're grinding up Republicans and turning them into fuel.
What's with the hate-filled?
That's what I wanted to say.
Who's hateful?
I don't know. This is the thing that, my contempt for Gavin Newsom as a public official doesn't extend to his existence as a human. It's not filled with personal animus. I just don't like him I think he's a feckless leader. And he's
Are they maybe talking about their treatment of Trump? Because I have seen hate-filled before, and I would say that might qualify as hate-filled.
Absolutely. And there are some among us, who might regard, abortion as sort of maybe hateful. I don't know. But in any case, sounding the alarm, the rhetoric on the...
How in the world? Abortion in this recall thing is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Well, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's
that's right. That's their card.
Yeah.
I think that they have cards to play here. It's just their voting coalition is very easy. They need to get the minority constituencies and then the upper class elite constituencies. They need Silicon Valley turnout. Now, part of the problem might be they may have a hard time getting that second base out since every one of those smug elite SOBs is currently at their home in Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
Or looking at new office space in Austin.
Right. Or just up, on the other side of the Lake Tahoe. Yeah. So I would let's get back to Larry.
So where are you at? What's the handicapping on the recall right now?
Well, right now the polling shows that it's within the margin of error that Newsom will be recalled. And this is where it begins to look like, okay, so just to remind everybody, there's two questions on the ballot on September the 14th. And the first question is, should the governor be recalled? The second question, if he is, who should replace him? On that first question, the polling shows really tightening
and there's
numbers.
it's yes or no.
That's right. Yep. So if he is recalled, then the Democrats' decision, the party apparatus's decision to actually not run a Democrat on that second question starts to look really dumb.
No. I disagree.
Okay, tell me.
I vehemently disagree. Dumb is not something that happens when you end up being wrong. Mm-hmm.
You're saying it was a wise bet.
Look, what could be dumb is having Bustamante be the backup and that giving enough support to get people to go vote for the recall that then still doesn't give enough support for Bustamante to win, and Schwarzenegger becomes governor. In other words, the politics of this and the pragmatics of this could easily be called dumb the other way too, because it's all an unknown. Mm-hmm. All things being equal, if someone came to me and said, Newsom's your guy, and you're in charge of this strategy, and you are either going to run to protect against the recall with a Democrat on the backup or not, I would say not. 10 out of 10 times I don't want a Democrat on the backup.
Fair enough.
If this guy, if the Democrats in this state can't beat a recall with that voter registration advantage, then it would not matter if they put Barack Obama as the backup. They deserve to lose control of this state. And because clearly that means that's how much the voters have rebelled against COVID tyranny.
Let's talk about Larry Elder, who jumps in the race and within 2 weeks is outperforming longtime politicos, well, at least one longtime politico. That's Kevin Faulconer, former mayor of San Diego. You've got John Cox. You got Jeff Hewitt, who doesn't even show up in the polls, libertarian out of Riverside. You've got Kevin Kiley, who's not polling well, I think because he's just not well known. I talk to Republicans, and they ask me, who do you like personally? Who do I like personally? I like Kevin Kiley.
It's a simple principle, Will. I know you like Kiley. I like what I read, too. I don't know him.
But I like Elder.
You don't use a recall to get name recognition. You come to a recall with name recognition.
Of course. Yeah. So
and footnote 1, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Footnote 2, Larry Elder.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah. So Larry Elder jumps immediately.
Oh, I'm sorry, Caitlin. I apologize. I'm sorry, Caitlin. You had name recognition.
I had got a press release yesterday from a Christian organization referring to each of the candidates very respectfully, even the governor, and then calling Caitlyn Jenner the Republican candidate representing sexual gender dysphoria. Okay, so will Larry Elder replace Governor Newsom in California's recall? Steve Forbes says, yeah, hope so. And I got to say, Larry Elder's been at this business for a long time. His name recognition isn't anything like Arnold Schwarzenegger's global reputation, of course. There are lots of people who did not grow up in the 80s and 90s as I did, listening to, even when I was on the left, I listened to Elder. He is a super smart dude. And I think that his ability to use the bully pulpit might be really effective. But let's keep in mind that even if Larry wins, and you can tell us more about your sense of Larry, but I think even if he wins, he's got less than 1 year in office before he faces everybody in an open primary in June of 2022. So less than 9 months in office, effectively. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if he can use those 9 months to leverage himself into the general election. Because that primary, again...
Why are you saying less than 9? Why wouldn't it be 14 months?
Because you get into office in September. That's 3 months, plus a June primary is 6 months. That's 9 months, right?
Well, yeah, but what's the primary have to do with it? He's still in office to the election.
That's clear. He's in office, but if he doesn't make it past the primary, he's done effectively by November of 2022.
Well, why would he not make it past? He'd be a shoo-in in the Republican primary.
Well, remember, it's an open primary.
I know, but he'd be a shoo-in in the number 2 spot in the primary.
You might be right.
No.
You don't think so?
I'm 100% right.
Okay, good. All right, so then I will...
My point is, your point is still legit. You're just off on the months, I think. He's still only going to have a short period of time, and then he's going to face overwhelming obstacle to try to keep the governorship. So here's the play. You know how I've talked quite a few times that like the way all these stars have to line for Newsom to lose is that there has to be more COVID tyranny, more COVID stupidity, more CD. All that stuff's come together to kind of help the cause. Okay, and Newsom has done everything wrong along with it. But now let me turn the table a little bit. What does Elder have to do to win? Well, the first thing is something I can't answer for him, is he has to want it. And if he wants it, he will be. I don't know if the recall passes or not, but if Larry wants to win the replacement candidate race, he will win it. He's not going to lose to Kevin Faulconer or John Cox.
No.
So the question becomes, can he go actually impact the first vote, which is recall yay or nay? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be him going and swaying votes in minority districts. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He can do it. But will he do it? Will he spend money? Will he spend energy? Will he spend... It's not a comfortable thing. He's going to have to get his hands dirty. He's going to have to go do this thing.
Right.
He's got to go work hard.
Well, I've seen him in 2 public venues, and the enthusiasm was surprising to me. Not because he doesn't deserve it, but it was just surprising. And, these were friendly Republican crowds in both cases. People went nuts, and these are in one of those occasions. These are very, very wealthy people, and friends of yours, friends of mine, and they are like lights out for this guy. They are ready to go to battle.
So then, can he win a real governor race with much bigger voter turnout a year and a half later? And my answer is that it would all depend on what he does in that year to kind of unbrand as a Republican and upbrand as an independent-minded school choice advocate. There's an instinct there that he'd have to have, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's got that instinct. The question is, will Californians give him a chance? And then in the general election in November 2022, that every government union will be dumping. I mean, they will see him as an existential threat. And then the gloves will drop and you will see race baiting, Uncle Tom calling from the left. It's going to be really ugly, and they're going to have, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. These groups will pop into this. I do want to pause here for just a commercial word about California Policy Center, that one of the things we've been doing, of course, is encouraging government workers to get out of their unions. That has helped just drive down union membership in California to levels that we haven't seen. I'm talking about government unions, to levels we haven't seen since the year 2000. They're at a 20-year low, basically. And we've helped deprive these unions of about $250 million every year. $250 million. This is significant money. And, we're still working on this, in part because we think that Democrats and Republicans in California have a right not to have the people who work in our government control our politics as well. So just keep that in mind, that's also a kind of a thing operating in the background here that the press does not pay a lot of attention to, but which we've talked about on the show. I want to point out that in the Biden infrastructure bill that's now being debated in D.C., one of the most interesting things for me is that there's an element in there which would, I think, there's no question, this is a postscript, not even a postscript, what would you call it, an amplification of policies in California to really punish suburbs for what they call racist and systemic violence against poor people. That is, that if you can't move to a place like, San Mateo or Cupertino or Newport Beach, Beverly Hills, Malibu, if you can't move there because you don't have the money, this is evidence of systemic racism. And it's a really fascinating argument. It suggests that because of slavery and Jim Crow, black people were denied the opportunity to raise family capital, and the result is they can't live in these nice places, but should be allowed to. And it's not just black people. It's really a class play on the part of the left. So we see this out of Senator Scott Wiener. Let's file this one under the Wiener Watch, the alliteration I just love. Wiener has been proposing legislation now for years that would force suburban communities in California to accept really dense, high-level housing and transit hubs, and would punish them for not doing so. His argument is that it's racist primarily, and also just a violation of poor people's right to live wherever the hell they want. And by poor people, I'm including me. I can't live in Newport. I can't live in Cupertino. I don't have that kind of income. I'm not the guy. So, but according to Scott Wiener and now the Joe Biden administration and its infrastructure plan, this is the play. This is the problem. The suburbs have a dangerous to the climate antipathy for density. It is racist to oppose density. It's bad for the planet. And so if you hope as a local government official to get access to this just absolute pig's trough of cash coming out of the federal government for infrastructure, you had better open up your zoning to eliminate single-family housing and increase densities. This is also a play to the people who, all of us who are concerned about homelessness. The argument is, well, if you just jam dense housing into suburbs and deny people who live there the right to control the zoning that they've purchased into, then homelessness will disappear, the climate will be healed, and racism will end. It's a utopian project. I refer back to our conversation at the very beginning of the show about utopianism and human nature. So anyway, David, lots of stories here, but the bottom line is we're seeing an extortion play by the federal government. We're going to fill up the trough with trillions of dollars, or at least $1 trillion, and then we're going to offer to local governments so long as they eliminate suburban housing. And if they don't, we're going to punish them by either denying this cash or even sort of making it difficult for them to do anything to operate in the state.
It is extortion, and it needs to be watched carefully. And my feeling on a lot of it is that it's not headed to courts in California. It's headed to courts in Washington, D.C.
In San Jose, our friends at Opportunity Now posted a really fun, just a little piece. Local Dems vote to preserve single-family zoning in wealthy white suburbs, but endorse greater density in San Jose. Apparently, the Central Committee in Santa Clara County voted that San Jose only needs to have more dense housing, that all the upscale places in Santa Clara County, they don't need it. Just San Jose, where poorer people live, that's where they're going to just jam in multi-family housing into more middle-class neighborhoods. And there's a sense on the right, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily true, but boy, if you're a Leninist, it sure sounds true, that what's going on here is an attempt by the left to just obliterate suburban affection. If you eliminate suburbs, then you eliminate the last bulwark against kind of overarching leftism everywhere. The Democrats have not been able to penetrate the suburbs the way they can the cities, so the goal is make the suburbs into cities.
It's culture war stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's wrong, though.
Tell me.
Well, I just did. I think it's wrong.
Tell me about why you think it's wrong.
Well, the burden of proof is on them. But this is as old as Jefferson and Madison. This is Jefferson and Hamilton. This is, in a lot of ways, a tension and a conflict that's never gone away in our country. I am a conservative, and I am an ideological and philosophically limited government advocate, and I don't believe that has anything to do with being agrarian or urbanist or new urbanist or suburbanist. I think that living preferences, in theory, are clearly apolitical. However, culturally, they have become marked as most prevalent with a particular political alignment. So there's more left-leaning voters in urban places, more right-leaning in agrarian. And historically, the suburbs have belonged not to the far right, but to the center right. Trump screwed a lot of that up. Okay, he lost a lot of suburban voters. But the right's paranoia that an attack on suburbia is an attack on right-wingism is not so much a thoughtful critique. In other words, you say, make my argument. I would like to know their argument for how the dots go. If their point is that the attack on suburbia is being done with the heavy hand of the state, well, that's true. But that's true in urban areas too. The zoning requirements and the environmental requirements are just as stringent in big cities, more so.
Yes.
So do I agree with the premise behind their accusation that there is a cultural identity in suburbia with right-wingism? I don't agree with it. What I think there is a comfort level in suburbia with hypocritical right-wingism because of NIMBYism.
Yes.
And so at the end of the day, I am for a geographical agnosticism about political ideology. What I want is movement conservatives that can move from point A to point B consistently and cogently, and I want them in places with big, tall apartment buildings, and skyscrapers, and I want them out on the farms, and I want them in tract homes that make me feel like I live in a witness protection program.
Well, this is why I dismissed
that. Was my little slap against suburbia.
I liked it. Yeah. And I like what you say, and that's why I refer to this right-wing thinking as, this conspiracy thinking as kind of Leninist. That if somebody benefits from this thing, well, then clearly this is what they wanted, and we know what they want, what they're doing, what they're up to. Yeah, I think if we think that way, then we surrender the cities. Hey, do you have to go, or do we have time for some letters, which I always promise?
You
got to run.
I do, but let's take 2 minutes.
Okay, here we go. Let's see, Ian Pope clarifies on the story about Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene coming to SoCal. He says that out in Riverside, just as in Orange County, it appears that the city council threatened the operators of the convention center, a private company called Rain Cross Hospitality Corporation, and not just the council threatened them. Principals at the company received death threats. Thanks, Ian. An anonymous community college professor says he was annoyed with you, David, for talking trash about community colleges and saying that they are mediocre. I teach in one, and I'm a faithful RFC listener. We each have our gifts, and mine is teaching, so I'm at a community college, and I'm not a researcher. I'm sad that David, a guy I respect, calls me a mediocrity. I wrote the guy back myself and said...
I never saw that email.
I wrote the anonymous community college professor back that we all say things that on reflection we might regret. You were being fun and funny, and I think that's all that was. But I understand the man's point. Micah Kreider, listener, writes, he was listening to a show in which we were talking about the travel ban. As a Montanan, he has been feeling an inexplicable sense of loss and emptiness, and now he knows why. All those California state officials will be greatly missed. Economist Tony Lima says regarding the travel ban that there is an exemption for sports teams if you have signed a contract. So if the travel ban limits the participation of UCLA and Utah, it wouldn't, or Georgia, it wouldn't if the contract to play that game was already signed. I looked up on UCLA's football schedule, and their schedule is already set up to play the University of Georgia through 2026. So a few more years of, being able to travel to states that are on the travel ban list.
Apart from the politics of the states that are allowed to travel, just on a more important note, can I place a wager on that game? UCLA, Georgia?
Bulldogs, Bruins.
In Georgia.
Yeah. Christina Ripley Coleman says she looks forward to...
Are they playing tackle or two-on-touch?
Flag. Christina Ripley Coleman says she grew up in Southern California, left in 2013, now lives in San Francisco. That's San Francisco of the East Coast, Philadelphia. She wants to ask whether you and I share her sentiment that the decline of California is in part because of the ballot initiative system with so many special interest groups. Maybe direct democracy isn't always a good thing. I'll let you answer that one. Direct democracy, is it a bad thing?
Yes.
The initiative? Okay, good. Do you want to expand?
Well, it's against the principles of the founding. I mean, it's been tried. It's it's consistent in an application of Greek democracy. So out of the original beginnings of what we now refer to as democracy out of Athens thousands of years ago, it's consistent, but it was improved upon with representative form of government.
Right. Yes.
And it avoids the propensity to mob rule.
Yes, and that's mob rule is how we got bacon shortage coming our way. Regular Inland Empire listener Trish, the teacher, says she's wanted to write regarding the governor's refusal to surrender emergency powers when he reopened the economy back in June. She says, in her opinion, his refusal to surrender emergency powers is a deliberate act to keep us in a state of continued uncertainty, and that breeds chaos. A little like, she says, because she's a teacher, when kids come into a classroom at the start of the day and you tell them there will be a lockdown drill sometime that day, but we don't know when. Students can't concentrate because they're too busy waiting for the emergency. Since a large portion of Californians don't trust the governor because he makes decisions based on what's expedient in his own interest, most people will just be waiting for any little change in virus counts to trigger a full-blown lockdown again instead of getting on with business and living. Also a reason to keep masking up, she points out. This must have something to do with teachers' union, she says. If it keeps emergency powers, does it give the union leaders a green light to resist a full day in school? Yes, is my answer. David, anything you want to say about COVID and keeping us in a state of perpetual uncertainty?
I mean, I don't think that the motives of all the people that are responsible for this matter a whole lot, because, and they are impossible to discern. What I do know is that we are living through something that is exponentially more egregious than any of us ever thought possible.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to talk about, Dave, before we rush off?
No, but just please do mark for next week. I did follow up with a lot of CalPERS and CalSTRS research. We don't have time for it this week, but I would like to present some things to our listeners next week on the pension funds and the incredible ESG integrity of the fine folks there.
That's all we have time for today. You can always find this podcast on the National Review website, but it's easier for you and better for us if you subscribe, and that, of course, gives us a higher profile, helps others find us. Email us. You'll find our email addresses, Twitter handles, and other fun details in the show notes. On behalf of my friend and co-host David Bonson, we give thanks as ever to show producers Sarah Schutte, recording engineers Brian Tong and Glenn Hall, and all of our friends at National Review, especially but not only Jack Fowler. And I want to thank all the listeners who send letters and story ideas, man. Thank you so much. And thanks also to Metalachi, that's the LA-based mariachi and metal band, for our music. La revolución continúa en la semana próxima.